Welcome Unity developer to this week's C# lesson, and in this one we're going to be taking a look at if statements. Let's open Unity and dive right in. So before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to a chap called Adam, who recently became my first Patreon, and this is great because it's really going to help me to make better videos. So thanks Adam, much appreciated. So far we've looked at variables, we've looked at methods, and now today I want to take a quick look at the if statement. So we need our code to make decisions based on one or more conditions. So if one condition is met, then our code goes one way, or if it's a different condition, then it goes another way. And this in programming terms is called control flow. So our first kind of control statement that we're going to be having a look at is the if statement. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my scripts folder, I'm going to create another script, called C# script, and I'm going to call it control flow. So we have our normal script here. This is what you get by default when you create a new script in Unity. We're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the two using statements at the top. We don't need those. And for now, we can leave our start and update functions in place. What we are going to do is we're going to create a variable that we can manipulate in our inspector whilst we're running the game. So first of all, we're going to create a new variable. So we need to be thinking about our access modifier, our data type, and our data name. Now for our access modifier, we don't need this particular variable to be accessed by any other class, but we do need to be able to see it in the inspector. So it's going to be a private variable, so we can only get access to it from the control flow class. And to make sure we can see it in the inspector, we are going to make it a serialized field. Now, you don't have to write private here. We could just leave it. And then by default it will be private, but for the sake of the tutorial I'm just going to leave it in so you can see what's going on. And we're going to create a data type of int, and its data name is going to be GameStop share quantity. So our GameStop share quantity variable, which is of type int, which is an integer, is just going to hold a value of the amount of GameStop shares that we own. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and remove the start function. I'll do it again. Start method. Let's go ahead and remove the start method. Again, those two methods and functions are kind of the same thing. We're going to try and keep it consistent and go with methods if you watched my method video before this one. And in our update function. Oh
No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
We are actually going to use our very first if statement, our very first selection statement. And the most difficult of programming problems can often be simplified down to a set of choices that a game or the program can evaluate and act upon. We're going to create an if statement here. This is our first one. And we're going to say if input dot get key down key code dot, let's say, space. So what we're doing here, well, we're using the if statement and we're going to use it to check for a user input. And in this case, it's going to be the spacebar. So if the spacebar is pressed, it's going to do anything contained within these curly braces. Now all we're doing inside these two curly braces is we're going to be calling a method. And we're going to call our method compare GameStop shares. And then finish it off with our brackets and then a semicolon. We haven't created this method yet, and a bit of a shortcut here is you can click anywhere on the squiggly line, and then I hold control and press the full stop, and it says you can generate a method. Go ahead and hit enter, and it creates the new method below. So what is our if statement doing here? So the basic syntax of your if statement is going to be the if keyword at the beginning of the line, a pair of parentheses, which is going to hold our condition, and this is the condition, and then the statement body, which is everything below it within the two curly braces. Now, I've just written it like this because it's easier for you to see and digest. But if we've just got a single line below our if statement where we only need to do one thing if it returns true, then you can actually go ahead and remove these curly braces. And this is perfectly valid code. This line of code here will only run if the line above it, our if statement, returns true. So now let's go ahead and take a look at some more complex if statements in our compare GameStop shares method. So let's have a look at a slightly more complex if statement. We're going to write our keyword of if, And then we're going to put our parentheses there. So this is where we're going to put our condition. And we want to see if our GameStop share quantity is equal to 0. Now we don't write equals as one equal sign, we actually need 2. And you need 2 equals because if you were to take one away, what we're actually saying here is we're trying to assign the value of 0 to GameStop's share quantity. We're saying that GameStop's share quantity is equal to 0. But if we're trying to make a comparison and check, then what we need to actually do is put 2 equal signs. So if our share quantity is equal to 0, then we're going to do everything within these 2 curly braces. And all we're going to do is do a quick debug.log, and we're going to write to our console if we have no GameStop shares. And then you finish that off with the semicolon. So don't forget, we're checking here using our keyword of if our GameStop share quantity is equal to 0, then we're going to display this message here. Now, optionally, we can use an else statement, which will store the action we want to take when the if statement comes back as false. So this is happening if the GameStop share quantity is true, but if it's false, then do this. We could say else, and we can write with our 2 little curly squiggly lines, if we have GameStop shares, debug.log, you must be so rich. I wish. So what we're saying here, if the condition is true, do this. Else, if it's false, do this. So let's jump back into Unity and see this in action. I'm going to go ahead and create an empty game object, and I'm going to drop my control flow script onto said empty game object. And let's start off with having no GameStop shares. And so we're going to go ahead and hit play. And then nothing will happen. But then if you watch down here in our console, I'm going to hit the space bar. So that if statement is triggered true because I've hit my space bar. And then we're going to compare our GameStop shares in our code. And it says, ah man, you could have been rich. Why is it saying that? Because here, in if GameStop share quantity equals 0, it then does this because this has come back as true. Let's go ahead and set this to 150 for our share quantity. And then we'll go ahead and press play. And then as soon as it's running, we'll go ahead and hit our space bar. Boom. So it's checked all our if statements, and it's come back and says, you must be so rich. You can tell it's done that because it's checked for our input. It's fired the compare GameStop shares. So it's taken us to here, and then it's assessed our share quantity. But at the moment it's 150. So this is going to return false. So it's going to jump down to our else statement, and it's going to print out, you must be so rich. So let's look at jazzing this up a little bit, because you can actually do more than one comparison inside the if statement. We can actually check for a couple of conditions. We're going to actually use a new keyword here. We're going to use the else if, and then we can open another pair of parentheses and put some conditions in here. Let's say that we want to see if our GameStop share quantity is greater than 100, but also check to see if it's less than 200. So we've got 2 conditions here. We've got the GameStop share quantity being greater than 100, and we also need to check if it's less than 200. And we can do an AND statement, because you can also create more complex conditions with basic math operations, such as greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and you also have the OR, which is the 2 lines which got there, and then you can also do the AND, which is exactly what we want. So we want to see if the GameStop share quantity is greater than 100, and if it's also less than 200. And then press enter. So if our share quantity is between 100 and 200, let's go ahead and write a new debug. Bet you wish you brought more. And then finish it off with a semicolon. So let's go through what logic we've got here at the moment. We're checking to see if we have no GameStop shares, and if we haven't got any, when we get this message. Else, if, so we're checking another condition. And we're actually doing 2 here. We're checking to see if we have over 100 shares, and if we have less than 200. So if it's between 100 and 200, then we're going to get this message here. And if neither of these are true, then we're going to get our else, which is then going to be you must be so rich. So let's jump back into Unity quick and let's test this out. So let's start off with 0. I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And then down in here, when I hit spacebar, oh man, you could have been rich. I really could have. And let's see, let's go for 150 now. So this is going to test whether it's between 100 and 200. I'm going to go ahead and press space. And there you go, it says bet you wish you brought more, just down here, which is also here. So this is returned true. Now let's go for something like 50, and it should return our last selection here. So I'm going to go ahead in my control flow, set it to 50, press space. You must be so rich. And this will work if we go like 250 as well. Let's clear that a sec. You must be so rich. So what we've done here is we've actually set several conditions, and in each one we've taken a different route depending on if the condition is met or not. So you can see here how you can branch your code off and have it take a different route depending on different scenarios and different conditions. It's also worth noting that use cases of if statements won't always require checking for a positive or true condition. And you can use the not operator here. And let me show you what I mean. Let's go up to the top and we're going to write a new serialized field. I'm going to put the access modifier in there for you so you can see what I'm doing. And we're going to create a bool, so a true or false. And we're going to call this should check shares. And we're going to assign it an initial value of true. We want to test the shares. So how can we use the not operator? Well, in our update function, we can say here if should check chairs. So this is checking to see if we should check the chairs and if it's true. But then if we want to see whether this condition is false and only do something if the condition is false, we can use the exclamation mark, which is the not operator. Go ahead and put the exclamation mark there. So if should check shares is false, then do this. We say debug.log cannot check shares, and finish off with a semicolon. And then we can say here else if it's true, if should check shares is true, not false, then do everything inside these curly braces, which is then going to allow us to check our shares and compare them. So let's hop back into Unity. Now at the moment, should check shares is marked as a tick, so it's going to be true. Let's see what happens if we turn it off. So we're making should check chairs. I keep saying chairs as like the objects that you sit on. Shares is false. Let's clear this. So we should see our message that they cannot check the shares. Cannot check shares, and it's going to do that every single frame. So I'm going to go and mark it as true now. So now it can check our shares. I'm going to go and press my space bar key. No man, you could have been rich. I have no shares. And what we've done here, I don't want to get too complicated like too quickly. Let's make this a bit smaller and get a bit more of it on the screen. And what we've got here in our if statement, where we're detecting whether we're allowed to check our shares, in our else statement, we're nesting statements here. You see we've got like an if within an else condition. And this is nesting statements. And you can create complex logic routes through your code, which is kind of like a decision tree, where it can kind of lead you to the labyrinth of possibilities. I tend not to use too many nested statements because I find it hard to follow what's going on in the code. So this is probably be as far as I'd ever go down in terms of nesting. I won't have another if inside another if inside another if. It can become very tricky to kind of figure out what's going on when you're debugging. Well, that's another step done in your C# journey. Hopefully you're starting to find these tutorials useful and they're actually being of some help to you. And if they are, it really helped me out by supporting the channel. If you could go ahead and hit the like button, that would really help me out. Next week, we're going to be taking a look at the switch statement, which some people like it and some people don't. But we'll take a look at it and you can decide for yourself. I'll see you then.